So my name is Matt Bertulli. I'm the founder of Demac Media, or one of the founders of Demac Media. We're a team of strategists, designers, and developers that focuses on, helping retailers and brands build e-commerce platform, or digital commerce platform. E-commerce is kind of a bad word now. So we've been in business about 5 years, and largely design and about half design, half development.
Great. Tell us a little bit about your journey in this particular business. Was it your idea? How did you get together with your partners? Where did it go from there?
Sure. Yeah. So I left a company called NetSuite just after we went public. I think about 2 days actually after we went public, and I was working in their pre-sale engineering team. So I knew I wanted to start a business. I come from a family of business owners, largely in retail. Didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew that my background is development. And my wife's designer, my partner's developer, and none of us had any experience in sort of sales or biz dev or like the front office of how to run one of these things. So I took a job at NetSuite in pre-sale engineering, knowing that like at some point, I want to do this myself. So we went public, left the business to start Demac. Did it on my own at first because I didn't have a business plan. Like we actually didn't know what we wanted to be. So what we are now is like not even close to what we started as. But I just like saw kind of a market evolving, particularly in Canada. E-commerce here is probably 6 or 7 years behind the States. So we started with this idea that we're going to do something in e-commerce. We're not sure what, but we've got a pretty big network of people that we know. We know a lot of like industry folks, a lot of good talent, great designers, great developers. We'll figure it out, right? And that was the business plan. It was like one line. We're going to do something.
So there's no formal business plan?
No, there still isn't. It's an Evernote document that I don't even call documents, but it's like we change it every year. So I've got like a new one each year that kind of just
So
evolves.
What's in the document? Is there any kind of direction in there?
Yeah.
You must have some kind of.
Well, I mean, we break it up into the various like parts of the business, right? So there's like a high level strategy of where are we going as a company.
And where does that strategy come from? How do you figure that out?
Customers. Like it's the simplest thing that we know how to do is so we've got a really good relationship with about 15 or so of our best customers. We've known them for years, and we talk to them regularly. So based on a lot of the discussions we have with them, that's pretty much what my job is evolved into now. It's like all I do is talk to our best accounts and just try to figure out like what are they seeing in their business. Mm-hmm. Then we take that and we kind of like distill it down into what we like to focus on. This is a business like we're pretty narrow in what we do. Like we say e-commerce, we say design and development, but like we only work with one platform, now two, but like that's 6 months now that we've had two platforms. Mm-hmm. So that focus is kind of limited what we can work on. So we try and take as much customer feedback, come up with a high level strategy, and then in this document is basically like, what do we need to do from a marketing perspective, a sales perspective, operations and delivery process, like how are we structuring the company, all comes from what's the next year going to look like.
Okay.
Right. We've actually, for the first time ever, I think we've got like sort of a 5-year sort of forecasted plan now for the business, which is kind of weird because we don't actually know what that means. We just did it and we're like, I don't know what this thing is, so let's try.
And when it comes to things that are less operational or say activity or task based, how do you give direction to the company at a philosophical or cultural level?
That's actually a really good question. So we've been really like loosey-goosey around culture, more just because it's something that we've actually, I think we've done pretty well. Like I think for the first time ever we've just had one of our engineers tell us that he's leaving the company. So we've never lost anybody. Nobody's ever left. And it's just moving closer to home. He commutes way too much, so I'm like totally supportive of the decision. So culture to us has just been that like we've tried to create an environment, or I've tried to create an environment where like I just want to hang out with these people, right? So we always hire on like that personality first, and like can I see myself having a beer with this guy or this girl? And as a result, we've naturally found ourselves, we've got like 4 or 5 like really anchor personalities here that I think like they represent what the company culture is, and they kind of carry it for us, right? So it started with us when we were a small team, my partners and I, and now it's our team that actually moves us forward, right? And that, so like we do like some regular things like stand-ups, and I'm always talking to everybody as much as I can, but there's no like defined methodology about how to communicate with the staff. It's just we all see each other a lot, so let's chat.
So let's talk about that for a little bit. The physical space that you have here is great. You are divided on 2 levels, but tell us a little bit about how physical space works for you in terms of leading the company and making things work and team structure and all that.
So we hate the 2 levels. I was born strictly out of necessity, as we outgrew the upstairs space. So first we outgrew down here, then we outgrew upstairs, then we took over down here, so we have both. And right now we're kind of split. Like upstairs, as you've seen, is development, DevOps. Down here is all design front end. There's the 2 floors have now developed their own personalities, right? Like the developers they go out for their own kind of beers, or they do it. So it's actually now causing us more work to try and keep the company as like one cohesive team and one unit. That's the one thing I'm looking forward to with finding new space, is finding one big floor where everybody can sit and be a team again, because we were like that up until the last 12 months. So it's now a challenge, having both floors.
When it comes to your style of leadership, you always pointed out that the culture is loosey-goosey, and that's okay, but in terms of your particular style of leadership, how would you describe that?
So when we're looking to recruit someone here, I like to warn people. I'm a really, really bad manager. I'm a particularly good leader, and by that I like being the guy to kind of like rally the troops, and I'm generally a pretty upbeat dude, and I'm very casual. So like my style is I'm your buddy, right? Like we've got a pretty clear vision of what we want to do with the business, and I think we do a good job of telling people where we're going. We're quite transparent as a company. I like to be as transparent as possible. I like to tell people if we're doing good or we're doing bad, or if we're working on, like we tell our developers and our designers, like when we're going to go out and like try and get business, we'll get them involved in that process. Like we'll let them know, like, do you have any interest in this kind of customer, right? And that's more just because I want people to feel like there's this inherent trust between like myself and my partner as the owners and us as a team. Like I don't want there to be a separation, right? We're all kind of trying to do the same thing here, and have fun with it. So like transparency is really important to me, and I guess like the social aspect of it has been really important to me. So leadership from that perspective, like that's kind of how we like to approach it.
So your leadership style sounds quite natural to you. Do you think it was always natural? Did it evolve? Was it something you learned?
I think I learned it from my grandfather, actually. So our family had a large like home decor and design business in Northern Ontario, and I grew up in that business. Like I didn't have babysitters or daycare or any of that stuff. Like I basically grew up in that back room or that office. So I got to see kind of my grandfather and my grandmother, and then my parents and my brothers. We all grew up in an environment that was highly social, with customers coming in all the time, and like going out to strangers' homes. Like my mother, she's gonna design something for them. It was very weird. So I think the social side has always been pretty easy, just because of how I was raised. I think having like staff, like people that work for you, is really weird. I don't know why I'm still not quite used to that. Like I tell my mom all the time, like I don't know how you did this. Like we're 5 years in, and I'm like I still find this strange. And but it's fine. Like my grandmother, she's just moved down here, and I was talking to her recently. She had that business for like 40 years. Wow. She still just shrugs it off. She's like, you're never gonna know what the hell you're doing. Well, you're never gonna have the feeling like you know what the hell you're doing. So I don't know. I guess like leadership for me is a funny word. I like I think of it just in terms of like daily actions, and like you're the leader by sort of title or responsibility, but it's not much difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So apart from your family, are there other sources of guidance and maybe mentorship that you get? Yesterday you mentioned you have a good relationship with another company.
Yeah, like the guys at TWG are, they're like less than a mile from us, and we've gotten closer over the last couple of years. And we all met. So like Toronto's got a pretty decent, I'd say more than decent, great community of like digital shop startups, agencies, and we all kind of came up together. And I met the TWG guys and a whole bunch of other business owners at this thing here in Toronto that we started called Lean Coffee. So when the whole like lean methodology was coming out, and like Eric Ries and these guys were becoming famous, there was a meetup that was started, like let's get together every Tuesday and have coffee, and there was like 10 of us or 12 of us that started this thing, and we all kind of met that way. And we still, like, every now and then we get together as a group of founders that started Lean Coffee. There's like 1,400 members in this thing now in Toronto. And it's like twice a week, and it's still going. But it's been, that support network has been crucial, because we all didn't know what we were doing together, and we all still don't know what we're doing together. And we all kind of like, Chris and Dom and I get together for lunch probably once every 4 or 6 weeks, and we just sit here. It's like, so what did you learn this month? And what's new for you? So I think like having those guys and that network has been good. We've been really fortunate in that I've got a pretty decent group of sort of advisors that have been with us from the start.
Is that formal advisors or informal?
It's more informal. They've kind of grown into friends now, and we meet socially probably more than we meet just for the point of business. But like good friend of ours is his name's Bernie Lee. Sorry, I'll start
that sentence again.
Yeah, so a good friend of ours, of Dimitri's actually, now a friend of mine, his name is Bernie Lee, and he was a former recovering venture capitalist, and he's now got his own solar power startup, and like he was in the VC side for 10 years, right? And he's given us probably some of the most valuable advice that we could have gotten, just because of his perspective on startups and business. Like he was seeing, hundreds of them, and what made them work and tick, and like, how to be a decent founder and a good leader, like that stuff. And even though he's a finance nerd, that having his perspective was like super valuable.
Where would you not go for advice?
That's a good question. I don't know. In our industry, I can only speak to our industry, because it's like I would stay away from like, payment companies, right? Like that, I wouldn't get anything from. I've never gotten anything from them.
Yeah.
I find like I always learn something from somebody. So like, give me an example. Friends of ours, like close family friends, run a very successful industrial cleaning and restoration business, and they have for 30 years. It's nothing even remotely close to what we do. But I have still learned like really good things from his parents running that business over the years. So I don't know that like there's industries you want to stay away from. I know in our particular vertical in commerce, there's certain types of companies that there's so many of them, it's very hard to hear through the noise. Payments being one of them, like hundreds of payments companies. Like, I don't know who the leader is anymore. So it's tough. But like we pick up stuff from everybody. It's just a matter of listening.
Yeah. So when you think about what's next for Demac and for our industry as a whole, how do you know where to point? You said you got this 5-year plan. How do you know where to point the business? What direction? What trend? What are you looking for as signals in this noise to give you guidance?
I think like there's a few things that we're always kind of looking for. I think the one that we've been having the most success with in the last year or so is just what do we actually want to work on. But more focusing on that, and like what's going to make us happy. What are we going to have fun with, rather than like what would be the best business opportunity. Like what are going to make the most money. And I think now that we've started to think more about like what kind of projects do we want to focus on, what kind of technologies do we want to work with, other platforms, right? We were so focused on Magento for so long, that we just never really picked our head up and said, like, is there anything else we kind of want to play with? And the guys were like, yeah, let's try Shopify, or let's mess around with some CRM stuff for commerce. So I think we're taking a lot of guidance now from our team and what they want to do, and less on like what we think is the best business opportunity. So like, I think our plan now, actually, when I look at just like a forecasted, P&L and where do we want to derive revenue from for the next 5 years, a lot of it has to do with that, as opposed to I think we could do a lot with in-store tablets or something, right? Like maybe that's not the best place for us to spend our time, but it's a great opportunity, just not for us. So I think it's more that now.
Is that a function of the fact that our industry is also becoming more specialized and fragmented?
I think so. Yeah, I definitely think so. I like it too. I like that the industry's getting a bit, I think that the more specialized companies like ours get, the more success they're going to find, and I think that it's actually good for the industry too, right? To have more specialists, less generalists. Get away from this concept like everything. Companies like ours, just like we're all part of the Wild West. I hear that all the time. Like, you guys are just like, we don't know what the hell any of you do. So I'm tired of hearing that, and I think that the more that we all specialize, the better. We can narrow our focus and our message, and it becomes clear to the customer, it becomes clear to your team. You can rally people around that. You can get your customers to kind of get around that. So I'm a big fan of specialization.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about the partnership. How many partners do you have?
Yeah, so legally, it's myself and my co-founder, Dimitri, but my wife is actually creative director.
Okay.
So legally in Canada, she has half of my ownership.
Right.
So there's the three of us actually started the business, and
Okay.
so the three of us are partners in the business.
And what's your perspective on having partners, including new partners, finding partners? Just your perspectives on that.
I actually, so when I started the business, started on my own, I invited Dimitri to come in and be my partner in the business, and along with Jen, just because I didn't know that I wanted to do it alone. I don't think it's a matter of capability and whether you can or you can't. I like having people that own the business, that are there with you through that sort of thick and thin, and good and bad. And, it's great to have that extra person or two to talk to about like ownership level stuff.
Right.
So I would, and I get that question a lot. Like, do you think you should have co-founders? I think you should. I think you should have somebody to share that journey with, and like share the burden, right? I don't know. Sometimes I wish it was like there's definitely days where I would say, God, I really don't want any business partners today. Like, you guys are just a pain in my ass today because you're fighting me on something. But then the next day you're like, it's probably good that you fought you on that, or provide sort of a balance. Like, I'm a very optimistic individual, and Dimitri is a very realist, and he'll shit all over anything, and that's good, right? It's like, I've always got a million ideas. He comes along and he craps all over them. He says, no, 99% of those are bad. Let's do that. Right? That's nice to have that counterweight.
Yeah. So if you were to do the last 5 years over again, would you do things differently? Would you change anything?
I would probably have been a bit more aggressive early on. I think we're
aggressive in terms of growth, or
in terms of growth and confidence, right? Like, and I think the confidence comes with experience and knowing that you can do it. But if hindsight being 20/20, I would definitely go a little faster. Some of our competitors went a lot faster than us. And it's not necessarily a size thing, but it's definitely like the type of work they were getting into. There still is a fear in the business of taking on too big of a project or too big of a client, because we've never done it before, and it's like there's a question of, can you do it? Can you do it well? And are you going to enjoy it? So I think I would have probably gone a little more upmarket faster, because the capability was there. We were all experienced people. We just weren't experienced at doing it for ourselves. Right?
What's your approach to growth in general? Do you see growth as a strategy, or do you see it as being a consequence of the other things you do?
I think it's a strategy for the next year, and then right now we're kind of in this, let's see where we finish 2014,
Does that mean you have an exit strategy in mind, or is that
No.
just that you?
No, we just kind of like the
What-
size of the business we are right now. I think
which is what?
I think we're 33 people, and it's nice. Like we still know everybody, right? Like no personal things about everybody. You know, when we have holiday parties or just like team events, like their spouses can come out and like we can actually talk to them. And there's that feeling. I'm a little afraid of getting away from it if we got too much bigger. I think we're going to definitely grow. I think the plan is to get to about 40 or so this year, in similar roles that we've already got. So just expanding the team a bit. But then I don't know beyond that. I think then growth just might be a consequence of being in business, and in my opinion, being in a business where like demand far outweighs supply.
Right. So going from 30 to 40 is a fairly significant jump.
Yeah.
20-25% increase. What changes then for you as the leader? Like, what do you need to fill in terms of gaps to be able to run that kind of business?
Yeah. So I guess I've kind of been going through this exercise in the last couple months of trying to figure out like what is it that I'm doing right now that I'm not particularly good at, and I could probably bring in somebody who would like to do that and be very like much better at that thing than I am. So I'm trying to free up that kind of like I'm not good at this work onto people that I think can do a much better job of it, so that I can focus on the things that I like to do. Like I like the human side of this business. I like dealing with our team. I like working with customers. I like the strategy of what we do. I think that the more I do that, the better leader I am, right? And for a lot of reasons, right? Like when you're doing something you like, you're in a great mood and it's good. And when you're doing something you don't like, you just want to like put your head through a screen. So I think you focus more on that stuff. It's probably a good thing for everybody here that that we're always doing that.
We've heard from a lot of the guys we've spoken to about those leadership changes that it's sometimes hard for some people to make those changes and evolve from being technically good at something to being the leader or the entrepreneur in the organization. Tell us a little bit about how you've evolved, because clearly you're on that path. You've gone from just being a technically competent person to somebody running an increasingly larger business. How do you make those adjustments personally? Like, how do you change the way you are in order to be a different person?
I think the biggest one is fear, right? For me, there's always a fear that like the more I become the leader and the entrepreneur and out of the sort of the operational side, and like being on things all the time, I'm always afraid. My biggest fear is that people will not know what I do, and they won't know like what's your value to the business. Like, why are you here, man? Like I don't want everyone to hear that question. So I think as the business has grown and my role has evolved, that's like my biggest worry, is that like my team just has no idea what the hell it is that the dude in the back does, right? And I think that getting over that, every time I look to take a part of what I do and give it to someone else and like let go of that thing, as hard as that is to trust someone, especially with like really critical business things, it just comes down to that fear of like you're asking another person how to take on more of your responsibility. So I've always got this fear of like, am I gonna become the unknown guy in the company? I don't want to do that. So, but I think you kind of, being a leader is a full-time job. Like being the vision and the direction and steering the ship, that is a job. But it is I think it's a hard job to describe to anybody who has not done it.
Right. Matt, thanks for your time. This has been awesome. Really appreciate it.
Cool. No problem, guys.